Let me now introduce our presenter, Ang Jandak. Ang is a marketing professional with over 18 years in the marketing industry with a focus on digital. Ang believes people are the foundation of any business. She is adamant about creating and streamlining processes so people can focus on people, not on paperwork. Ang has been a frequent presenter for SCORE, and we appreciate her willingness to continue to share her knowledge and experience. Ange, let me go ahead and give you the floor at this point. The controls are yours. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am so happy to be here, and I'm excited to share this information with you. There is a lot to go through. So I really want to get to your questions at the end because I feel that best practices are so unique and individual to each individual business. So I want to lay a groundwork of framework so that we all are starting from the same place. And then you can ask me really pointed, targeted questions, and I can help you as best as I can. So welcome to SCORE Introduction for Best Practices. We're going to go over our introduction, glossary of terms, because not everybody necessarily knows all of the terms, and I hate when people are super jargony. We'll go over needs assessment. How do you figure out what you need from a website? We'll talk about best practices, go over some of the providers that offer website services, and then if we have time, we'll go over some examples. So the goal is to enable everyone to understand the basic concepts so we can have as much time for specific questions at the end as possible. Here's the introduction. First off, social media is not a website. I can't tell you the number of times that I have met with someone who says, I don't need a website, I have Facebook. I don't need a website, I have Instagram. I don't need a website, I'm on Amazon. Amazon one is kind of iffy, but the social media, that's not a website. You should not build your entire business around that. I have some client who built her entire business around her YouTube, and YouTube shut down her account. You do not have control over social media. It can be taken away from you at a moment's notice. It's not fully featured. You don't have control over the data. And your competition can get displayed right next to you. So all of this to say, when we're talking about websites, we are not talking about Facebook pages. We're not talking about Instagram pages or TikTok. We are discussing actual websites that you own and can do whatever you want with them. The number one question that everyone asks, how much does a website cost? And the answer is 0 to infinity. Companies like Amazon are continuously investing in developing their websites. Amazon's research and development last year was $82.68 billion. And you'll say, hey, they made a lot of movies and they did Lord of the Rings, or not Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, sorry. They only spent $16 billion on all of their content last year. So 82 billion was for figuring out their website and optimizing it and making it better. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to show you a couple of different free options that you can utilize, but I think that most businesses are better served by something in the middle. What drives the cost of a website? And the answer is variables. Again, I want to point out that this is going to be a unique experience for every single business. Every business is going to have their own needs. There's an infinite number of features, applications, integrations, and design fanciness that change the time and expertise level to develop a website. That doesn't even get into scaling, how many franchises or locations are you going to have, or quality assurance, ensuring that when you test that everything works properly. The more elements you have, the more likely it is something's going to break. So testing can go from simple grammar checks to ongoing detailed code reviews. How do you figure out what to include? And we go based on your needs. There's a big difference between wants and needs, although we aren't always super clear about what the difference is. In order to understand that, we're going to have to talk about some concepts regarding websites that you may or may not be familiar with. That's where we get into the glossary of terms. Domains. It's easy to remember address that's used to access a website, also called a URL. We have some examples here: .com, .gov, score.org. Unless you're super small, you're going to want a custom domain at the very least, so you can have a professional email address. A business looks much more professional and established if you have a custom email address as opposed to businessname@gmail.com. If a customer sees Gmail addresses, they'll think either it's temporary or the person running the business is inexperienced or doesn't want to put in the effort to run, have an actual business email. And we all know that that's not true because running a business is hard regardless. So you're going to want to make sure that you have a custom domain. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You get a domain from a domain registrar. So a domain registrar is a person or a company that manages your reservation and purchase of domain from ICANN, which is a big long thing for the people who run domains. Excuse me, my daughter's here. Baby, you got a lunchbox. Hey. So just because a company is listed as a domain registrar on this page, it doesn't mean that I think they're good. For example, I'm not a huge fan of GoDaddy. Hi, go see Daddy, please. Thank you. I think that they're predatory and don't like working with them, but it's usually the only domain registrar that people are familiar with. Not all domain registrars are created equally. The words that come after the dot, like .com or .net, and there are new ones that you might have seen like .io, .expert, .business, they're called TLDs, so top level domains. And not every registrar is registered to sell every TLD. So if you have one in particular you're looking for, you might have to narrow your domain registrar search to ensure that they have what you're looking for. Also, many registrars will offer introductory pricing. So you get your first year for $4, especially for these specialty domains. They'll offer ridiculously cheap pricing, but the next year you have to pay $32. And that's the price that they'll expect you to pay every year. You should only look up a domain if you're ready to buy it. Some domain registrars will buy a domain if you don't purchase it and then sell it for a higher price since they know that there's interest for it. I do have at the end of this presentation resources that allow you to search for a domain without having to connect to a registrar, and it can show you the pricing that all the different registrars offer. Can you register with one ICANN and change the ICANN? ICANN is the registration body. They're the ones who create them. The domain registrars are the ones who actually utilize it. And yes, you can transfer from one domain registrar to the other. Some of them do it for free. Some of them charge a fee. So, okay, I really want to answer questions, but I have to get through this. I'm so sorry. I'll scroll back and get to them as quickly as I can. Private registration is allowing a domain or a registrar to act as a contact point for domain lookups, keeping your information private. When you buy a domain, ICANN requires that you include contact information for legal purposes. It's not an option. You can't put fake information there. You have to. They need to know where to find you in case there's something illegal happening on your domain. They send mailings to confirm to make sure that you are who you say you are. You're giving them the correct information. They contact you, but anyone can do a who is lookup and see who owns the website and see all the contact information. That's your name, your email, your phone number, your physical address. It's very scary to have that information out there. So private registration exists. Your domain registrar acts as a go-between. So anyone who does a search only sees the registrar company's information. They have to contact the registrar who will contact you. So nobody gets to see your information. And then you can figure out what to do. Some registrars charge for this, but others include it for free. Yes, I will answer questions at the end. I hate leaving people hanging. Hosting. Hosting is storing your files so that they're accessible on the internet. The host is where your website actually exists. When you think you're editing it, you're actually just accessing the files. So kind of like if you use your phone to Venmo money, you aren't going to the bank and getting money out and sending it. You're just using connections to access it. Your domain registrar has a form called DNS, Domain Name System, that translates human readable domain names like Amazon.com to machine readable IP addresses, which are a bunch of numbers almost no one ever will remember. That's all websites are actually just a big long series of numbers. That's their address, and URLs allow us to connect to those in a way that people can remember. So there are a bunch of different types of hosting. Shared hosting is when there are other accounts on your server and you all have defined limits. So they'll say you can only get this much bandwidth, which is traffic. So essentially people visiting your site or downloading things off of your site, you only have X amount per month. Dedicated hosting means you get your server all to yourself. You don't have any neighbors. Cloud hosting is flexible. It scales based on your needs. So if you get famous, if you're on the morning news or something, and all of a sudden you get a whole bunch of people coming to your website isn't going to crash. It's going to grow with need, and then they'll charge you after the fact for your new level of hosting that you utilized. Managed hosting is when your hosting company is actively responsible for everything. They manage your backups. They make sure that your plugins are updated, that you are using the latest version of PHP, everything like that. They optimize, they have extra security protections. It's basically a higher level service. And then self-hosting is if you have an actual computer in your possession that you're responsible for and that has all of your files on it, and you are running the framework to ensure that people on the internet can access it. Hosting provider is somebody who provides the infrastructure for storage. It often includes additional features like email, IT help, security backups, and more. There's some examples listed there. The best way that I can think of to showcase everything is a story. We all love stories. So think of it this way. You are a website. Your domain is your name. You can have a lot of names. You can change your name. You can have nicknames. Maybe your family calls you one name and your friends call you a different name, but you're still the same person. You move to a new apartment complex, a new hosting provider, and your apartment, the server. So you have a new address, which is the IP address that we talked about, which is just numbers. And that's where all of your stuff is. Now you have mail forwarding, which is the DNS. You can have a ton of great amenities like a doorman, laundry service, room service, or nothing, and hear all of your neighbors' arguments and have to park down the block because there are parties happening and people are in your assigned space and the leasing office doesn't do anything. That is the range of hosting providers that we're talking about. There are a lot of features and cost comparisons when it comes to a hosting provider, but if you have to focus on two things, focus on uptime and security access. So uptime is the amount of time that sites are up. If sites are down because your host cheaped out on equipment or staffing or updates, that means everybody's sites go down. It's been on the news sometimes when servers crash. I think Amazon had one. Their AWS servers crashed and half of the Eastern Seaboard lost their websites. So that's downtime. We want the opposite of that, which is uptime. Because when we have downtime, your business is losing money and there is nothing you can do about it. You can't call somebody else and say, hey, this person, they messed up and now my website is down. I want you to fix it. No, because you can't access your website to transfer the files over. So there's nothing you can do. As for security, you want to make sure that there's some sort of authentication in place. So even if someone figures out your password, they can't take over your site. That can be handled through an authenticator app, text, SMS text, security questions, or a backup email address. The next is SSL, which is a secure sockets layer. It's essentially a protocol that says we're encrypting the information that passes through on this website. So it's something that a hosting service can provide for you, or you can get it on your own through a free service like Let's Encrypt. Some companies charge for SSL, but most of them include it for free. You can see with SSL, the little lock at the beginning of your address bar shows that it's a secure site. When it says HTTPS, as opposed to just HTTP, that shows it's a secure site. And also Google is starting to not let people access sites that don't have the secure socket layer. If it just is HTTP, you might get a warning that's very similar to what's on this slide here that says, warning, this is unsafe. So a subdomain is an additional level that you can add to your domain. So you do that at the hosting with your hosting provider. So you can organize content that serves a specific function on a website. So if you have a nickname, for example, like nobody that knows me calls me by my legal name. So I could have a subdomain for just my legal name because I know the only person who's going to use it is my mom. Or if you have a nickname from college, you know that all of your college people would only are interested in that information. I think an excellent example of that is Google. So if you want to use anything in the Google infrastructure, you use a subdomain. If you want to access Gmail, you go to mail.google. If you want to use the Google Calendar, you go to calendar.google. If you want to access Google Drive, you go to drive.google. If you want to access Google Docs, you go to docs.google. That's how subdomains work, and they're incredibly helpful if you want to have really targeted experiences on different parts of your website. A CMS is a content management system. So it's software that allows you to build or manage a website without having to code. If you aren't just going to upload straight HTML files or CSS files, you're probably using a CMS of some sort. There's a lot that are out there for all price points. Some are open sourced, which means that, oh, we have a slide that talks about that, so I'm not going to get into it. Some are open source, some are proprietary, which means that it's very closed, which are usually a much more secured CMS. However, it doesn't have as many options for flexibility, so that's something to be aware of. Content. We're going to talk about content a lot. Content is anything that you encounter during an internet experience that conveys information visually, auditorily, texturally, or tactically. So images are content, videos are content, text posts, blog posts, listicles, quizzes, all of that is content, different types of content. SEO is search engine optimization. It's the process of editing your website to improve rankings in search engines. Now, I did a workshop with SCORE previously where I went into greater detail on this, and those links are included here on the slide if you want to get really deep into it. Any one slide on this presentation, I could go into incredible detail and have an entire workshop on it, but I don't have time, so we're going to move on to the next one. The algorithm. People say the algorithm, and what is an algorithm is a procedure where they use to solve a problem. It's essentially a structure of rules that we use to come to a conclusion. And when people online talk about the algorithm, they're usually talking about the search engine algorithms or the social media algorithms. And what that is essentially based off of their parameters, which are usually secret. It's going to rank how many people see your stuff. And one of the things that they use to rank is the engagement, how many people go to your website, how many people comment on things, download things, sign up for things. Also, your subject matter. Is it related to what people are looking for? I'm sure we've all gotten sites where they say that they're going to answer a question. We get there, they're not answering our question. Yeah, when is this site coming back? When is this show coming back? And you go through this giant long thing that talks about the entire production history of a show, and then they're like, no one knows when it's coming back, is all the way at the bottom. Those aren't necessarily great in terms of engagement. You have your subject matter. Another thing is ensuring that you're not actively harming yourself. So you might have seen that you talked about it in the news, but people using the term unalived when they're on social media or on their websites, because they've realized that if they use other words that refer to that, the algorithm penalizes them and nobody sees their content, regardless of what the context of it is that they're using that word. So just something to be aware of. And now we can talk about the needs assessment overview. So the number one thing is you have two goals. Number one thing, you have two goals. One, what do you want your visitors to do? Unalived. Essentially, it's a word that people use instead of killed, murdered, things like that. They will say unalived. Okay, I'm gonna close the chat because I'm gonna be distracted otherwise. I'm so sorry. So the first thing, what's your goal? What do you want your visitors to do on your website? And then the second thing is, what information do you want to give and receive? And we're going to go into a little bit of detail on that. You need to discover your current needs and your future needs and how they all work together. So acknowledge what you need now and what you want for later, and the direction that your business will take. So for example, we have somebody who works in their kitchen and they make these gorgeous custom cookies, and they need an order form. They don't have a storefront. They don't have anything like that. They really don't want a huge influx of people. They just need somebody to be able to fill out a form, and they get an email that says, I want you to make these cookies. They'd really like online payments so they don't have to handle and deal with that. But if they're talking about getting orders in the door, they don't necessarily have to have that right now. But they know in the future, they might have more bakers. They might want people to sign up for a subscription service for their cookies. So that's something that they're going to want to consider as they grow forward, to ensure that whatever they work with, whatever platform they go with, whatever CMS and hosting, that they can have those, you can have access to those features. So this is something that I say. I don't know if anybody else has coined it. I don't know if I invented it or if it came to me in a dream, but I say sustainable scalability. Which is creating a proactive roadmap where you can add and grow your own terms instead of having to tear down and rebuild every time you reach a new stage. And I differentiate this from what a lot of people use, which is MVP, minimal viable product, which is, as long as something is better than what you have now, then don't worry about it being perfect. It just has to be better. And my issue with MVP is that it's very reactionary. It's not necessarily done with an endpoint in mind. It's just, okay, next step, next step, next step. And all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh, how did we get here? So with sustainable scalability, from the beginning, you know where you want to go, and every little step that you take takes you towards that goal. So you can see in this image, if you just built the gray building with the little hallway, that's great. And then you can add on the tan building with very minimal impact. You don't have to change the gray building at all. And then if you wanted to add more gray buildings and more tan buildings, you can create a chain of them because they all build on top of each other. It's a very elegant system because it was planned that way from the start. So we need to talk about logistics. You need to have an understanding of how you will use your website on the back end. And when I say back end, I don't mean like computer back end wise. I mean the part of your business that your customers don't necessarily see. What does someone visiting your site and completing an action, which we call a conversion, mean for you? Is it a sale? Is it contact for a consult? Is it signing up for a newsletter? What is that goal, and what does that mean for you, for your business? What steps do you have to take after that? If someone orders a pizza, what happens? They pay, something prints in the kitchen. It might integrate into a display system so that you can track order status on the customer end. Then it goes to the driver who is handling deliveries all in the same area with an optimized driving route. At the end of the month, you might want to track how many orders came in online or what deals worked out best for the big game. So you're going to want to track what coupon codes people are utilizing. You need to consider these things up front. So when you plan out your roadmap strategy, you have them in front of you and you're considering them. Feature breakdown. I just wanted to list a couple of different features that a website could theoretically have. There are so many, but these are some of the big ones when you get into e-commerce, when you get into integrating with other tools you might have, like your point of sale systems or your inventory systems, customer service. Are you going to have chat bots? Are the chat bots going to be manned by customer service agents? Or are you going to have something using AI where someone can automatically take themselves through the buying process, or finding what fits for them, or finding a flavor that's right? So these are a giant list, but there's even more to go through of different features that a website could theoretically have. And when you look at your logistics and you look at your needs and you look at the features, one of the things that I have in the resource slide is a link where you can look at other business websites based on the industry that they're in, the type of work that they do, and you can see the features and how they integrated them on their websites. And you can sit down and apply, what do I need? What do I want? What is have to happen right now? And what can I do later? And it's just a nice way, using a little chart like this can help you finalize your thoughts and then shift them around a little bit easier, as opposed to just trying to write a list. Just put them in there, and then we're just going to focus on the want row, the now row. Sorry. If it's a need, we have to get that done. If it's a want, let's try to get it done. But if we're overboard on money, if we're overboard on time, it's something that doesn't have to be a priority. Doesn't mean you can't have it, just means it's not the number one priority. Now we're going to go into best practices. When you are building a website, you're essentially building it for two groups. You're building it for the algorithms, and you're building it for human beings. So we're going to go into a breakdown of the best practices for each of those, and sometimes there is overlap, so you have to please both of them. So talking about the algorithm, one of the first things that you should do is have a Google business profile. They used to be called Google My Business, but now they've changed it to Google Business Profile. It's good for SEO. It gives you priority placement if people are searching for things that you offer or searching for your business by name. That is always going to be right at the top, and it's always going to be easily accessible. So you want to make sure you have that, because if somebody is paying for ads that are based on your name, which competitors do, you don't have to worry about it, because you know that the Google My Business is going to be on top of that. So it also allows you to allows you to showcase essential information. You can showcase the services that you have. You can showcase if you are closed on certain holidays. You can allow people to see access to coupons and sales. There's a social media feature where you can do posts and talk about changes. And you could also create events. So if you're going to, I'm so sorry, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but you can create an event so that if you're going to have a special event, an opening, or something like that, you can put it on Google, on your Google business profile. And then when people search for events in the neighborhood, you will show up on that list on Google. They don't have to be searching for your business. They don't have to be searching for your industry. They will just see you by virtue of where they're located and the fact that an event is happening, and you will be listed on Google. So it's super helpful. You also should be focusing on answering questions. So it allows you to naturally match searches. When people search for things, they don't just search for one word. They have conversations with search engines. They are looking for something specific. They're not just searching cookies, because cookies could bring you recipes. It could bring you articles about cookie recalls. It could bring you all sorts of things. It could talk about computer cookies. People have conversations with search engines, and you have to have conversational responses. So if you have a landing page that speaks to a particular train of thought or searches or audience segmentations, you don't have to do one for each individual thing, but your big 3 to 4 to speak to visitors directly and make them feel heard. Hold on just a second. Hi, baby. All right. So one of the things is you get rich results, which are the way that Google showcases information differently. Once you might see people also asked down on the list, and so you can expand that. And if you frame things on your website in terms of a question, it is much more likely that you will show up in those rich results. So it also gives you a better understanding of your users, like we talked about cookies. Somebody might show, where can I find baby shower cookies in Buffalo? You would have on your website, are you looking for a place to order custom baby cookies? And by virtue of where your business is located, you will automatically get the Buffalo ad. So heading tags, a lot of people use them as a design element to just change their font and their size, but they actually have a functional use to them. So it showcases your content structure. So it says, it's basically an outline. If you've ever used an outline, you have your main points, and then you have subpoints, and then subpoints under those. So that is how a heading works. It showcases content structure. It allows for skimmability. Only use one H1 tag per page. It's usually the name of your page. And the reason why is you actively get penalized if you have more than that. So again, heading tags are not a design element, but they are incredibly useful when you are telling websites what your pages are about.
Yeah, let's go get more.
One of the things, hold on just a second. So many hats, I know. There's more detail in the SEO course that I linked, but schema or structured markup is when you tell Google or search engine what type of content this is. There's a special code language that's utilized that you can see when things are a product or when it's a movie or an event. It's all displayed differently, and that is entirely because of the structured markup. Yes, my darling. Hey, can you take your pumpkin and go show it to Daddy? So another thing that's really important is linking. So linking is two things: backlinking from appropriate off-site sources, so having other websites linking to your site, and then also internal linking from your page, so linking from your home page to your product page to your about page. That's all internal linking, and that is also essential to being able to have your page structure read by the search engines and also be easy to use for your users. We go into detail on this in the SEO workshop, but you want context and connection that makes sense. If your cousin's auto body shop links back to your personal training site, it doesn't mean very much unless they're both in the same local area, or you're showcasing exercises to combat leaning over a hood all day. If someone's constantly name dropping people or companies that mean nothing to you, it's kind of like that. Linking includes other people linking to you and the links in your site. So I want to be very clear about something. Anyone who guarantees you increased traffic is probably utilizing what they call a link farm, which is a bunch of random sites that nobody ever goes to, but they create a backlink to your business and they just spam a bunch of keywords. So it looks like a backlink about a particular subject, but Google cracks down on those, and you can actually be blacklisted entirely from Google if they find that you're utilizing things like that. So just be aware that if somebody's offering to help you with your traffic, understand what their methods are and ensure that they are not using link farms or any sort of backlinks like that. We've talked about the algorithms. Let's talk about humans. So the first thing that you have to think about when you are designing a site for humans is you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent in your branding. You have to be consistent in your messaging. You have to be consistent in your journey. In the resources, I link to the branding workshop that we did that has a whole lot more resources and information for you about branding. But what I'm including here is people like consistency, and they don't like thinking outside of that. I don't know if you know this, but back in the 80s, Colgate tried to create a TV dinner. And nobody would buy it because all they could think of was toothpaste. It didn't matter how good it was when the label wasn't attached to it. Once the label was attached to it, everybody thought it tasted like toothpaste. So that was not consistent for their brand, and so it did not work out for them. The other image that I have here is Skype. Skype is using like 4 different logos on these different pages, and one of them isn't even a logo, it's just text. You need to make sure that your branding is consistent. You need to make sure that your experience is consistent. If someone clicks on a social media post that talks about a new product, when they click on that post, that link better take them to a page talking about that product. You do not want them just being dumped on your home page for them to have to find it on their own. Ensure that when they click on something, it's going to take them where they think they're going to go. You also want to be predictable. So we in America traditionally read up, down, left to right. So we start on the first line, we go left to right, we move down to the next line, left to right. And that's how we use the internet. So usually we have our navigation menus either on the left or on the top. We ensure that navigation, like I said, on the top or the left. If there's going to be a collapsible menu, what they call a hamburger, it's either on the top left or the top right, out of the way, where our action buttons like close are. If you click on a logo, it's going to take you to the home page. It doesn't happen on every website, but it happens on enough websites that our brains have become accustomed to. That's the standard. If there's an underline on something, you're going to assume it's a link. You will click on that a whole bunch of times before you discover that it's actually just words. So don't use underlines if it's not going to be a link. If there is a standout button, that's the next step. If all the other buttons are one color and you have one button that's different, everybody's going to assume that's the button that I'm supposed to click to go to the next step. So also something to keep in mind is everything important is in the footer. So if somebody can't find something that they're looking for, like a contact page, they're going to scroll all the way to the bottom of the footer because they're going to assume that there's a link for the contact page there. Something else that I want to talk about is dark pattern UX. I don't want to delve too much into it. There's something in the resource page for it, but essentially it's about using design to trick users into doing something that you want them to do as opposed to something they want to do. So I'm sure you've gone to a website and they give you a cookie warning, and the only option is to allow cookies. You can't figure out how to close it. You can't figure out how to deny it. The only way that you can use the website is to click allow. And that is a fantastic example of dark UX. So don't do that. Do good things. I have a link in the resources. You can go over for more information on that. But another thing you have to do is be understanding. What's your user state of mind when they're utilizing your website? Are they on their phone? If you're a restaurant, they're on a phone. They're probably going to want to place a to-go order. If they're on desktop, they might want to peruse the menu. They might want to see what events you have going on. They might want to book a table. Considering where they are and why they're reaching out to you is really important. How do they prefer to process information? What's their level of expertise when they come to their website? Do they have an understanding of what they're looking at, or do you have to educate them, not just about why your product is better, about the industry that you're in as a whole? You also want to consider if they need hand-holding, they need you to tell them where to go, or they want to have their own control and be able to click on things and find their own way. What devices are they using? Accessibility, which is something that we'll get into in a little bit. But make sure that you understand why your users are coming to you and you bring that into your website. The reason that I brought this particular image, I just wanted to say, this is a product that is only available in Louisiana and only available through referral. So this is the homepage. They don't go into a lot of description. It's just get into it, because if you can find this website, you already know what you're there for. So that's an excellent example of they know their clientele and they know exactly what they're looking for and how to present it to them on their website. So another thing that you need to be is obvious. So you don't have to be subtle. People want to know what's expected of them on a website. Be blatant when you tell them what the next step is. Hey, if you want to sign up, click this button. If you want to learn more, click this button. If you want a consulting call, click this button. If you want a newsletter, click this button. Be obvious. Your website should be skimmable. Nobody wants to read a giant wall of text. You can use color, you can use layouts, all kinds of different elements to break it up to make it so that people can skim down the page, see what they're looking for. There's this thing called the squint test. And what it is visitors should be able to accomplish the main task that your website presents while squinting. And so I have put together a little exercise to showcase this. This is a real site that we've blurred. If you're familiar with the product, you know what website it is, but you can't read any of the button text, any directions. We're going to go through context and see if we can have an innate understanding of just being based on how we've been trained to use the internet. We can get to the checkout and buy something. So looking at this in the nav bar, we can see red. Red is usually probably the sale. The button, the header, usually that's something that is either a call button or sign up for a newsletter. It's not anything essential, but it's definitely an action button. Most of the time, the primary thing they want us to do is above the fold. So let's look for an action button above the fold, which is this big black one inside the hero image. And that brings us to this page. Now, if we're using standard thinking and context again, we are used to filters either being on the top or being on the left. So I can see that there's a couple of drop down options here on the left. That's probably the filter. We're feeling purpley today, so let's click purple. And we can see that all of the options that we have now are purple. So if we click the picture, that will probably take us to the product page, traditionally the picture or the title of the product. But we don't want that. We just want to follow the obvious, which again is the big black button. So we are going to press that on one of these. It doesn't really matter which one. And we can see that it got added to the cart. If we click the action button again at the bottom, which assumedly would be checkout, what happens? Oh, we get a pop-up. There's lots of buttons here, but they're all very different. There's the bright green ones and then a white one with a black outline at the bottom. Now, you can reasonably assume that based on the fact there are pictures there and the button is different, those are probably upsells. And the white button is probably cancel or go back because it's not continuing the black action button that we've used up to this point. So now we're at checkout. We pressed the black button and it took us where we wanted to go. We're going to stop here because I don't want to order hair dye, but you can see it was very obvious about how to follow the next step. You know, getting anything extra, go back. I had no chance of being confused, even though I couldn't read anything. It was very easy to see what the next step forward was. So we're going to talk about satisfying algorithms and people now. One of the first things is it has to be responsive. We say responsive. Technically in design and development now they call it adaptive. Responsive traditionally was where you just took a giant website and you shrunk it. Adaptive now is the entire layout changes based on the device that you're using. So here we have an example. This pet product company, they have two big pictures next to each other for each product. One is a detail picture and one is a far away picture. But then on the mobile version, they only show the far away picture. And then if you click on it, it will show you more information about the detail. They do this for screen purposes so they can get more information in a tinier space. And they also know that you aren't going to be able to buy it unless you click on it. And so that's the next natural step. It's important to remember that mobile phones and tablets are responsible for over 56% of global internet usage. That is the majority. And so ignoring mobile is something that you just can't do. You have to include it. We talked a little bit about appropriate content. We're going to talk about it again. Is your content useful to visitors? Is it a bait and switch like we discussed? Is the medium the best way to present the information? Everybody talks about video, how video is essential. Video is great. However, again, you have to consider the context and your user base. A lot of people don't necessarily like video. I think one of the reasons personally that TikTok exploded the way that it did was because it gave people the ability to watch videos and not have to play sound. The closed captioning, the auto-generated closed captioning, I think was a huge part of why that was successful. So many people look at social media at work. That was a huge plus for it, but they were able to do that because they understood how people use the platform. It's almost become a joke about how if you click on a recipe, you have to get somebody's life story before the recipe shows up. You have to click all the way down. It's buried at the bottom. Do we really need all that stuff? If you came to this workshop and all I did was talk about fonts, would you trust that I know what I'm talking about? Or would you say this was a huge waste of time? I'm going to register for another workshop and not with SCORE. Being able to showcase that you know what you're talking about in a very upfront way is essential for being able to build trust. So something to keep in mind when you move forward is making sure that you understand where your user's at, what their understanding is, and give them content that is useful to them in a way that they need it. You also want to consider loading speeds. You want to keep images small. If we download an image and it's huge, it has to load and that will take time and it will maybe not show up at all. I've seen lots of websites where they have such a big image, it doesn't show up until you already scroll to the bottom of the page. And you don't want that. It penalizes you not just for people seeing it, but also SEO. You want to make sure that you don't have so many fancy scripts and gadgets and pop-ups and all of those things that you add have to be executed and they also add to your load time. So ensuring that when you have a bunch of videos, if you are using video, YouTube and Vimeo both have the ability to embed a playlist where you can see all of the videos in one screen. There's a little slide out that comes out and you can click on it and see all of the individual videos and choose from them instead of having each individual video posted, because that increases your the load, and that reduces your overall speed. I have some site speed statistics here that I won't necessarily go into, but it's just, speed is really important, guys. It's important for, you know, the technical aspect. It's also important for people. We don't all want to be waiting for a site to load before we even decide if we want to go forward with it or not. So that site speed's important. Another thing that's really important is page structure. We talked about the linking earlier, and we kind of focused on the backlinking from the other sites. Page structure is internal linking, and how all of these different pages and categories and subcategories and navigation menus, how they all link to each other. So here we have an example of a retail site. I use this because it's a fantastic example of all of the different options that you can do with linking back and forth on the pages. This is just their menu. You can see the categories of how everything is broken down. And then if you go to an actual product page, you can see all of the different opportunities that they have to link to other pages. You can see where the stars are. If you click on that, it will take you to the reviews for that page and the ability to write a review. There's also a link to be able to sign up for their buyers program. You can also see their returns policy, which is linked to at the bottom of the page, because I couldn't fit the whole thing on there. They have, you know, other things that people buy with this, as well as, hey, you've looked at all of these other products, you know, do you maybe want to see them again? And that's what that little button is at the top. And once you click that, you get that thing with the black background. You can use free tools like Figma to lay out how you want your pages to connect to each other. It's good to start with 3 to 5 core pages, kind of the ideal journey that you want people to take through your website. And then how do those link to secondary pages? How do they link to each other? How do those secondary pages lead to other pages and back to the core pages and third level pages? You want it to be a big spider web, because that means if somebody is lost, they'll be able to click on something that they're looking for. Think of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is nothing but internal linking, and it's great because it helps you access the things that you're looking for. You also want to be aware of accessibility. Accessibility is really important, not just because it helps with SEO and ensures that you don't lose visitors, but you know, there's a whole bunch of communities that have no access to the internet. Less than 10% of the internet is accessible by people with disabilities. For the main reason is color contrast. People don't pay attention to color contrast, and anyone who has vision issues, including older people who might not see as well as they once did, they can't read a lot of websites. Another thing is ensuring that you have alt text, which is descriptive text for your images, because people with screen readers, that's how they see images and know what they're about. You want to ensure that you're labeling your form fields, that you're labeling links, that you're labeling buttons. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to showcase an effort. Widgets are great as shortcuts for things that be controlled by systems. I don't know if you've seen like the little stick figure person in the corner, usually in a blue circle, and they say that's an accessibility widget. But they can interfere with assistive technologies that people utilize, like screen readers. Sites should be designed with accessibility in place. Full compliance is very, very detailed and has very, very high standards. Very few businesses can fulfill it. However, just taking care of these things that are mentioned here puts you worlds ahead of other websites who aren't even doing this bare minimum. So we're going to talk about provider overviews really, really quick. Here are some examples of domain registrars. I have created a Google Sheets document that is in the resources that I will be continuing to update with essentially comparisons of all of these different service providers. So we don't necessarily have to go through these, but you know, logos are fun and we can see all the different options that are out there. So now I know that what you want is the free sites. So I want to be clear that I think all businesses should make having a polished professional website a priority and part of your budget. But if you're trying to get your feet under you and you're bootstrapping with no straps, these are options that you can look at. So the first one is WordPress.com, not to be confused with WordPress.org. WordPress.org is the content management system. WordPress.com is a miniature hosting platform that uses the WordPress.org content management system, but you can create a website for free. One of the things I like about it, it's scalable. If you start your business and you want to do bigger and better things, you can very easily transfer it over to WordPress.org. I have a list here of some of the features. I also, on all of these, I included the price for the next level up plan, because let's be honest, the free plans are incredibly limiting, and you at least want to be able to know what, if you are going to invest in the infrastructure of that provider, you want to know what you're looking at budget wise for the next step up. So another one is Podia, which is one that not a lot of people know about. Its focus is on online learning. You can create digital downloads, you can build classes, you can build community forums, create your own community, and they also have integrated payments right from the beginning. So you have to pay a little bit more in terms of fees. On the free plan, the fees go down if you have a paid plan, but you do get a full website. You get one download product, one coaching product. You can create courses, you just can't launch them, just to make sure that you like what's there. They also have a whole bunch of add-ons like email and Teams and different processes that you can utilize. So I happen to love Podia. I think it's great. But you know, the next level up is $33 a month, but there is the whole point of Podia is being able to get you to start a service-based or digital-based business as quickly as humanly possible. Another one that people utilize is Weebly. Weebly is mainly for e-commerce. You get a free SSL, which we've talked about, you know, and it's the next level up is $13. Weebly does have ads on the free version, so something to be aware of if you really don't want to showcase that, but you can use gift cards. So if e-commerce is really important to you and utilizing gift cards, you can do that. Equid is another e-commerce site which has a free forever plan, but it's only 5 products. Now, if you are an incredibly small business or you're really targeted and you have 1 or 2 great products, you don't need a whole bunch of products. You just need 5. This could be perfect for you. They integrate Facebook advertising right in their dashboard, and they set up taxes, so it's really nice and easy for you. And then your next plan is $19 a month if you wanted to upgrade to the next plan. HubSpot is mainly a marketing tool, but they recently released a CMS platform. I'm going to be honest, I'm including it here only because a lot of people who already utilize HubSpot might be interested in it. Their goal is they want you to buy all of HubSpot. But in the meantime, there's a lot of really cool tools here that you can play and experiment with to see what you need and what you don't need. So that is what I would use this HubSpot for. If you want to play around and find out what tools are in your needs, what tools are in your wants, what tools are in your down the line, this is great for that. Google Sites is another free site. If you go to sites.google.com, you can create websites there. And the nice thing about that is you can collaboratively create them. Most websites, you can only have one person working on something at a time. Otherwise, you'll overwrite each other. And Google Sites, because of the way it internally tracks changes, you don't have to worry about that happening, which is really great. So the thing is, though, it's limited customization. So that's something to be aware of. You're not going to be able to have a lot of flexibility or do a lot of really cool stuff with this. But if you just want a basic site, it works for you. The next paid plan is just what part of Google Workspaces. So essentially, if you want to connect your business domain to Google, so Google handles all of your email, that cost for everything, not just Google Sites, but for everything inclusive, is $5 per person per month. So it depends on the size of your team, what your investment for that would be. Wix is another very, very popular free site. It has ads. I've tried really hard because I set up Wix sites for people before, and they have changed on the back end how you set that up. and access it. I know that they're starting a free AI tool to build a website, and I don't know if they're trying to transition the entirety of their free plan to just the AI. But I wanted to include it anyway because I know that it's something that a lot of people utilize. So there's examples that we could get into. I see we're at 7:30, so I'm actually going to skip over these and go right into the questions if everybody's okay with that, because I want to make sure I get to those.
Okay, thanks, Ange. Do you want to go back to that question that was asked earlier? I think Wayne had a question here.
Okay, let's see here.
Let's see. There was a squatter on our etc.com TLD. So we went with IO, which aligns with our technology business. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that IO versus inc.com in this scenario.
So I think that you made the right choice. Especially now, .io is so ubiquitous. So many companies use it. When people first started building websites, there actually was a rule set for what everything meant. .net meant network. Org was organization, which it still is. Com is company. But now we have all these extra ones because we need them. There are domain squatters that will sit on names for 20 years and ask for $30,000 for those domains just because they think somebody eventually is going to want it because it has a .com, and it's not worth it. Now, in terms of .io versus inc.com, it depends on how your brand is presented to people. If you present your brand as always including Inc., then it would be fine. But if you don't, you risk somebody looking it up wrong. And I would say that the brand and having the .io is more important, again, consistency, than including Inc. if that's not something that you typically use.
Okay. All right. I think we're getting some more questions coming in. What do you think about Mighty Networks as a website online course community?
So I have never used Mighty Networks, but I was generally aware of it. And while I was pulling research for this, I saw that something happened with Mighty Networks that people weren't really happy about. I think it has to do with the payment structure. So yeah, that they raised their prices. So the thing is, there are so many other options out there. So if you aren't, they aren't good enough that everybody says you have to utilize them. There are competitors that are coming up every day. And the thing with hosting and providers and platforms is, for the most part, if you get your infrastructure right, you can move to whoever is best for you in that moment. You do not have to stay with a company forever. You don't have to worry about losing everything. The one change about that I would say is Squarespace. Because of the way that Squarespace is structured, they don't use traditional files. So if you ever look, if you inspect a Squarespace site, all of the names of their elements are gibberish because they're randomly generated. Squarespace is good if you have, you want to use a template, you don't really want to customize too much, you just want to put something out there very quickly. If you want to customize it at all, it is a nightmare. I have spent hours doing things on Squarespace that should have taken like 10 minutes or 10 seconds, like changing a color if it's not part of the original pack. So I say that only because I want to make sure that when I say a really generalized thing, like, oh, you can always move. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes you have to restart. So that is something to consider when you're looking at something like Squarespace. When you're talking about each item you have, should it all have its own dedicated page? For example, if you have 10 cookie flavors, do you need a page for each variety? I think that depends on your users. You could either have something where you break it down by size of package. So if you say, okay, You can buy a single cookie, you can buy a 3-pack of cookies, you can buy a dozen cookies, because maybe you don't want to offer every cookie flavor and every size. So they would choose based on size of pack, or you could break it down by every cookie flavor has its own page, and then they choose the size in a drop down. You are constantly changing your flavors, and somebody is going to want to have more information about the flavor, more information about the ingredients. I think it would make more sense to have each flavor have its own individual page, as opposed to each size have its own individual page. Does that make sense? And while
Hopefully.
I'm waiting to hear back on that, something that Lisa added was doing a blog. Is this helpful still, or is there a new format for blogs that works more like a link site, or example, a Wikipedia? So one of the big things for blogs was Google search crawlers come around more the more your site is updated. So what blogs were great for was having a place where your website was constantly updating, so they would constantly come back and visit for more information. Now, I think that it's good to constantly be updating your website, but I feel like it's better to focus on landing pages and really targeted journeys, as opposed to blogging just for blogging's sake. If you have a plan for how you want to utilize your blog, that's one thing. But if you're doing it just to push content out into the ether, and people, you don't really expect anybody to come to your blog or to read it, then I would pursue something else. I would say, focus on expanding on a product page, expanding on a use case. Did you get a testimonial from a customer? Do you want to share their story in a long form page? That's all something that you could do that would be new content, but it's not necessarily a blog. Hi, baby. It's okay. It's okay.
Break time, huh?
Yeah. So should I still build a website with links to pay for membership classes if I'm paying for a fitness software program, Studio Growth, that allows customers to pay for membership classes? So that's up to you. I know, for example, one of the websites that uses Podia is Four Eyes Woodworking. They have their main site built on Squarespace, and they use Podia just for selling their digital woodworking plans. So they utilize parts of it. They have a subdomain just for their shop, and that's what they use on Podia. So when you're talking about a website with links to pay, if you're getting specialized tools, like if you have a client and you're tracking their training on this other tool where they can pay and set everything up, that's totally fine. You can have links, but you also want to be able to explain more about who you are, who your team is, or more about why it is that you do what you do. Again, I always get incredibly wary about putting too many eggs in one basket when it comes to the digital space, because if a company goes under, usually they'll give you enough time to move everything over, but you don't want to have everything in there, so you have to replace your entire website. Maybe you just have to replace the product side of it and the payment side of it. Let's see here. The Q&A is not necessarily in the PDF, but yeah, in the oh, you already said it. Thank you.
Anyone else at this point?
I want to make a useful, free, comprehensive website for students studying literature, then offer courses for sale. Does Bluehost with WordPress make sense for the free stuff, and then lean towards Teachable for hosting the paid course? Yes. Short version, yes. One of the things to focus on with Bluehost has, I don't know if you're planning on using WordPress for the CMS through Bluehost, or if you're using something else, but you can have gated content. So you could essentially have your subdomain with Teachable be gated content. So anything with paid courses, they could either pay a subscription and get access to all the content, or they can buy courses individually. But having a separate host from Teachable is really beneficial. It gives you a lot of different flexibility options. What provider would you suggest using for a service business? We need to let folks know what we are doing, how to contact us, feedback, etc. In general, and this is, I'm completely biased, and you should probably not follow what I say. I've been a developer for a really long time. I have control issues. So I like WordPress just because there's so many options and infinite scalability. That being said, it can be really complicated to get into, or it can be really easy. You can buy templates, upload those. There are builders like Elementor, which is a visual drag and drop builder for creating your web pages on any template that is available. And Elementor is free. They have a pro version with special modules and features if you wanted access to that. But I have built websites that literally make millions of dollars off of free plugins on WordPress. So for me, I like that flexibility. But that's me. You need to work on what your needs and how everything that you're doing impacts on the back end. So if you're going to do a service business, they need to know what you're doing, how to contact you. Those are basic, what they call static pages, which is just content on a page. But are they going to need to sign up for services? Are they going to have to see what the different service options are? Are they going to get a visit schedule? Is that going to be something that's available on an online portal? Are you going to have a customer portal? Those are all things to consider when you're looking at the logistical side of everything. And you want to ensure that you have a provider that allows for that. Is there a framework or process for how to work out website pages, structures, and content? A lot of people will, sell you their methodology, but I typically just start with like a piece of paper and an outline. This is the main page. This is what would go under it. This is what would go under it. See how they're all connected. And then you could go to a product called Figma, and kind of visually lay it out. There's also a free app on iOS called MindNode, MindNode, that allows you to essentially what they call idea map and connect everything that you're thinking about. So that's another option. But yeah, everybody's thinking process is different. But in my experience, having a page, thinking about what content would be on that page and how that content would connect to other pages. Start with your main 3 to 5, what they call the core pages. So like your home page, your about page, if you have something that talks about your main products or something that you're featuring, those are all your core pages. And then you go from that to your secondary pages. And how would they loop back together? How would they cross-reference each other? Once you get going, you can just manually like, oh, I'm on this page, I created this new page and it would be a great fit here, I'm going to throw in a link. But once you get started, you really want to think about how you want that infrastructure to take place. Was your first advice to definitely get your email straight from your website? If I use Wix for a website but I have a Google email, I think it depends on the work you're doing. It depends on what your goals are. In my experience, we do a lot of user testing where, we just have random anonymous people go through things. Business addresses at Google or at Hotmail or Yahoo, some free thing. They test roughly the trust drops to like 15%, as opposed to like normally it's between 65 to 80%. It tanks. That being said, because an email address is attached to your hosting provider, you want to make sure you have the right hosting provider. On the resource page, I'm building a spreadsheet out that will tell you if you get emails, how many emails are free, all of that stuff. I don't like necessarily, if you're with a hosting provider that is charging you for emails, I'm not a huge fan of that. Maybe it's because I've been spoiled by being able to create infinite emails included in whatever hosting service I'm utilizing. But I think as important as having the email is, it's more important to make sure that you have that infrastructure foundation of your hosting, your domain provider. The domain providers are easy. You can skip those. You can have multiple. I have multiple domain providers that I use. The hosting is a bit more bread and butter. It's something that's a bit more, you need to be a little bit more choosy about. Currently have Squarespace working out the kinks. We'll be updating images and text. You offer critiquing services. I am flattered, but per SCORE ethics, I can't really help with that based on this. There are plenty of consultants, or what you're looking for is if you go on LinkedIn and you look for a UX designer or a UX director, something like that, people who look at user experience and user interface, and they will be able to essentially give you an audit and an overview. They might do it for free. They might charge you a really nominal fee, but that is the name of the expert that you want to fix what you're looking for. It's fine. Okay. Do you have a non-WordPress recommendation that uses? You are very messy. Using a database as a backend. I've used PostgreSQL for everything else. There is, and it's going to be on the spreadsheet. It isn't right now. It's in the specialty section, which is hidden because it's not flushed out. But I saw something in a forum where people were talking about something that utilizes the different databases automatically, and you can create entire websites from them. Like some of them use Airtable. It's really, really interesting stuff, but I'll have to see. I don't have anything off the top of my head though. What are the best domains for mapping? I would like a little bit more information about what you're looking for with that question. Does WordPress have the option to hire a web designer? Yes, so there's a lot of people who are WordPress specialists. You can find designers and developers who just focus on WordPress. You can also go online and go to places like Creative Marketplace or Envato, and you can buy templates that are essentially just drag and drop. It's already developed for you. You just plop it in and upload it, and it's beautiful. Or you could just hire somebody who focuses on WordPress development. This question for Angela. Yes, you can reach out to me. My SCORE email is angela.jandak, JANDAK, @scorevolunteer.org. I'm a mini micro homemade cookie business. Oh, I'm so glad that I focused on that. It's an option. I want to make sure that I didn't miss it. So yeah, I that would be really interesting to have in the presentation, since I use that as an example. Paid emails with Wix. How do you make a site secure? So like I said, most hosting providers offer a free SSL certificate. You have to just essentially click and turn it on. There's also a website called Let's Encrypt, LETSENCRYPT. And that will create a SSL certificate that you can upload to your website manually if your host doesn't provide it. Who do you suggest for hosting? There are a ton of different options. Me personally, I like SiteGround, but I again have control issues, and SiteGround gives me a lot of different options for control. But I also utilize managed hosting through things like WP Engine, Kinsta, Bluehost. I've used HostGator. There's so many options, and again, you don't have to be married to any single one. You can always just go and find what works for you, and if it doesn't, try something else. The slides will be shared. Yes. Tooljet is the thing you were seeing. Tooljet. I don't think so. But I'll have to double check. But I will definitely update the spreadsheet. Is there anything else? Because I do have to put my little one to bed. I know we said 8 o'clock, but I don't think I'm going to make it.
Well, thank you so much, Ange. It's an awful lot of information. I will be including your scorevolunteer.org email address in the information in the link for this webinar and the PDF of the slides. I'll be including your scorevolunteer.org email address. So if other people want to go ahead and get to Ange directly, you can do that through her scorevolunteer.org email address. Thank you, Ange. Lots of information there. Appreciate it very much. I hope that all of our attendees got something of what they needed, at least something of what they needed to hear tonight. There was something for everyone, I think. So we appreciate your presentation very much, Ange. Look forward to having you again as a presenter. And thank you to all of you for having been here tonight. And look forward to your getting on another SCORE workshop and webinar. Thanks and good night.
Always a pleasure.